They think fear comes from the screaming, from the wide eyes, from bodies reacting too late. But what truly terrifies is the silence that follows. The silence when no one is watching, when no one was ever supposed to be there. If you haven't looked away yet, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who feels a chill where others pretend everything's fine. And at the end, tell me in the comments, where does research end and obsession begin? I've never been afraid of the dead. I mean real fear, the kind that makes your stomach knot and your pulse race. That's reserved for the living. They lie. They love wrong. They devour. The dead, at least, have the decency to stay quiet. That's why in my final semester at Allegheny Medical College, I gladly accepted the night assistant position in the university's basement morgue. 2 nights a week, I cleaned instruments, logged tissue samples, cataloged remains. The kind of work most people avoid, but for me, it felt like meditation. The dissection lab sat beneath 2 layers of security doors and a ventilation system that wheezed like an old man with a collapsed lung. It smelled of hospital-grade alcohol, synthetic gloves, and something suspended in time. Even the sound of my own footsteps felt intrusive. Dr. Rourke, the lead pathologist, had only one firm rule: never activate the neural stimulator without supervision. It was part of the ethics protocol. We studied neuromuscular responses in freshly deceased donors, but only during controlled experiments. A good student would follow that rule, and I was a good student, until I understood what might be waiting beyond it. The first time I saw the device in action was on a Friday afternoon during a supervised demonstration. The stimulator was simple: 2 metal electrodes connected to an old analog control box with flickering dials. The body was that of a middle-aged man, dead from a stroke earlier that morning. When Dr. Rourke adjusted the current and placed the leads on his forearm, his fingers twitched violently. The middle finger shot up. Everyone laughed. But I didn't. I stayed still, staring. What disturbed me wasn't the movement. It was the pause between impulse and reaction, a brief hesitation, as if the body was deciding whether to obey. Something shifted after that. I began volunteering for extra shifts, nights, weekends, holidays, any excuse to be alone with the dead. Each time I cleaned the electrodes or filled out stimulation logs, my mind went back to that delay, that sliver of time when something hesitated. I needed to know if it was just a nerve delay or resistance. I knew I wasn't supposed to test on my own. That rule wasn't vague. But rules are made for people who are scared to know what happens when you cross them. In the 3rd week of November, I received the intake form for a woman in her late 20s. No name, Jane Doe. No family listed. The body had arrived from the local hospital following an unexpected cardiac arrest. No autopsy completed. No embalming performed. Technically, she was off limits, pending identification. The protocol was to keep her refrigerated over the weekend. Do not touch, do not begin documentation. But that night, it was raining hard. The lower halls were deserted, and I had the keys to the dissection suite. And more importantly, she was fresh. Dead less than 4 hours. The capillaries hadn't darkened yet. There was residual warmth beneath the clavicle, the kind of condition that, according to the literature, increased conductivity. I checked the hallway, toggled the emergency lights, switched the internal blinds closed, and disconnected the supervisor's desk phone. I wasn't nervous. I was methodical. I selected a clean set of electrodes and clipped them into the unit. Her name didn't matter. Names didn't mean anything down here. This was science. Or maybe something else. I placed the leads along her left forearm, kept the current at the lowest safe setting, and waited. A small shiver in the skin, barely noticeable. I increased the voltage. Her index finger curled, the wrist arched. Reflexes, that was expected, but that's not what I was looking for. I wanted something outside the rules.
I moved the electrodes to her feet, then slid one beneath her jaw and pressed the other to her sternum. When I activated the current, her chest pulled inward. Not dramatically, but with force, like a gasp. And then I heard it. A soft, wet sound from the back of her throat. Not breath, not speech, something in between. My whole body went still, not in fear, not at least, not yet. It was something closer to awe. That sacred kind of silence that only happens when you realize you've gone too far to turn around. I shut the power off, half hoping it had been an audio illusion, some odd combination of echo and static in the vents. But the morgue remained silent, dead, as always. I stepped closer and stared down at her face, eyes half-lidded, mouth slightly open. I saw faint condensation deep in the trachea, like a breath had almost risen. And then, her tongue moved, not like a spasm. It shifted with intention, toward sound. I should have stopped, called Rourke, documented, pretended ignorance. But it wasn't about curiosity anymore. I wasn't looking to replicate a result. I wanted recognition. I needed to know if she remembered me, if something had awakened inside that body and seen me. The second session was cleaner. I waited until past midnight, when no students or janitors were anywhere near the basement levels. I piped in ambient music through the intercom, something soft, classical, to drown out any sudden noise. I wore new gloves, replaced the leads with a finer set, no voltage loss, more skin contact. This time, I placed the electrodes directly over her temples. No muscle twitching. This was about the brain, not motion, not reflex. I activated 3 short pulses. Her eyes opened. Not all the way, just enough to reveal the whites. No iris, no focus, but still, something. A beginning.
I alternated the stimulation patterns, low, medium, oscillating. The limbs reacted like before, simple, predictable twitches. But her face, it was different. It looked like it was learning. The jaw adjusted to new angles, the forehead tensed and relaxed in unfamiliar rhythms, as if something within her was struggling to recall how it used to be. Then her lips moved. No sound, just shape. And I swear on everything rotten in this world, she mouthed, "Why?" 2 syllables, clearly formed. I stepped back, not out of fear, but out of something worse. Triumph in the shape of guilt. She had recognized me, not as Nathan the student, but as the one who had pulled something back and left it in the dark. The next night, I ignored me. No movement, no breath sounds. I checked every wire, every setting, changed the electrodes, tested voltage. Nothing. The body lay limp and indifferent. I called her name, Jane. Calm at first, then louder. I leaned in, put my mouth to her ear and whispered something I barely understood myself, a plea, a demand. And that's when the lights flickered. Once. Not like an electrical short. More like a warning. Like something had heard me and was deciding whether or not to answer. The following night, I didn't wear my uniform. I changed into plain black clothes, disabled the hallway camera for 7 minutes, just enough time to reach the dissection room unseen. I didn't bring the stimulator, just a white candle, an old analog tape recorder, and a hand mirror. I don't know why. Maybe because what I was searching for no longer belonged to science. I lit the candle, placed it at the foot of the table, and sat beside her. I asked, gently, "Are you there?" The mirror, placed over her mouth, fogged for less than a second. I should have left then. Most people would have. But I didn't. I smiled.
For the first time, I'd been answered without machines, without manipulation. It was the beginning of a conversation. I sat with her for hours, sometimes in silence, sometimes sharing stories about my hometown, the sound of rain on my childhood roof, the smell of my anatomy textbook from high school. She listened, or at least I believe she did. And maybe that's the worst kind of faith, the one that doesn't ask for proof, only presence. On Friday night, I went further. I laid her out on the main table, replacing the plastic sheet with soft cottoned linen, something more human, more intimate. I set the mirror again, but this time I placed the tape recorder next to her head and pressed record. I captured my own heartbeat. Then I fitted the headphones over her ears. She didn't move, but the mirror fogged 3 times, as if her body was trying to match the rhythm, like something inside was searching for the right beat to come back to. And for a few minutes, I swear the recorder malfunctioned, but it didn't stop. It kept recording without tape. The next morning, while reviewing the surveillance tapes as part of routine cleanup, I saw something I couldn't explain. At 3:17 a.m., the camera feed glitched. 6 seconds of static, followed by a blurry image. The table, from above. But there was something else. A shadow. Tall, narrow, standing beside her, out of focus like a figure too close to be captured clearly. I knew it wasn't me. I'd been behind the observation curtain at that exact moment. I replayed it 3 times, frame by frame. The camera angle never changed. No one came in. Not officially. Not visibly. But still, someone or something had been standing there, watching. That night, she was waiting. I know how that sounds, but there was something in the way her body was positioned on the table, how her fingers curved slightly inward, like they'd been arranged. I didn't leave her like that. I never left bodies in any position that would accelerate post-mortem stiffness. She looked receptive, closer than before. I approached without gloves, hit record, sat beside her, and just breathed. Quietly. She matched it. Faint, nearly imperceptible, but synchronized, as if somehow our timing had aligned. The next night, I brought nothing. No leads, no equipment, no wires. Just her and me. The air was unnaturally still. Not even the refrigeration unit hummed. Like even the machines understood what was in that room wasn't just biological anymore. I leaned my forehead against hers and closed my eyes. For the first time ever, beside a cadaver. There was warmth. Faint. Not physical. Something else. And then I felt her facial muscles shift against my skin. Not a twitch. A gesture. Soft. Intentional. Like a whisper that said, "Now you're not alone anymore."
After that, I started bringing her things. Small objects, personal ones. A pen my father gave me when I got into med school, a glass pin I'd found in the floorboards of the old library, a torn piece of my bedsheet. Tokens. Items with history. I placed them on her chest, always in the same position. Each time I returned, something was different. The pen slightly lower, the pin turned sideways, the fabric creased in a way I hadn't folded it. Subtle, the kind of changes only someone obsessive would notice. But they were enough. They were answers. It was early Tuesday, a little after 3 a.m., when I tried speaking to her for real. I set the room up like always. Dim lighting, tape rolling, door locked from the inside. But this time I brought something new, a stethoscope. Not to check her heart, that would have been absurd, but to listen for something else. Air, moisture, awareness. I placed the bell over her sternum and leaned close, cupping the earpieces with both hands to block out everything else. At first, nothing. Then, something. Muffled, rhythmic, like dripping, or like tapping. 3 soft thuds, repeating. Not in the chest, in the back of the throat, like a voice struggling to rise, but with no clear exit. That night, I started dreaming about her. Not fragments, full dreams, places, dialogue. I saw her lying under a pale gray sky, her eyes locked onto mine, wide open. Not smiling, not moving, but speaking, without sound. Always the same sentence, like an echo that couldn't decay. You called me, so take me with you. I'd wake drenched in sweat, a metallic taste in my mouth, bedsheets wrapped around my legs like I'd been wrestling something. And the worst part? Each time I returned to the morgue, her body seemed more aligned with what I'd seen in the dream, more deliberate, more awake. The next night, I gave in. I didn't resist the pull. I entered the room with my pulse thudding so loudly I couldn't hear anything else. I walked to the table like a pilgrim to an altar. I took her hand. Still cold, yes, but soft. Waiting. I leaned over her face just inches apart and whispered, "What do you want from me?" And there, in that space between word and silence, she blinked. Just once. Slowly, deliberately. Not a twitch, not leftover nerves. A decision. It was the first and last time I saw something entirely human in a body that had no reason to move. And it was also when I finally understood. She didn't want to leave. She wanted me to stay. I stayed with her until dawn. Somewhere during that night, the lines blurred. Between the lab and my own mind, between steel and skin. The smell of ethanol, the weight of the table beneath my arms, the translucent tone of her skin under soft fluorescent light. And when the sun broke through the small window, I noticed something that chilled me more than anything else. Her body was different. Not in the features or position, in the texture. She wasn't stiff, no post-mortem rigidity, no lividity. Her limbs were supple, responsive, not with life, but with presence. Something had come back. Not to leave, to wait. A week later, everything changed. The university announced the dissection lab would be closed for renovations. New supervisors, new inventory. The cadavers were being relocated to partnered hospitals, including her. When I saw the email, my hands immediately began to sweat. The idea of strangers touching her, wrapping her in plastic, shipping her like any other specimen, it made me sick. That night, I visited her one last time. No wires, no sound, just the candle. I lit it, held her hand, and promised I'd find a way. I didn't know how, but she did. Because in that moment, she squeezed my hand back. On the day of the transfer, I volunteered to assist the transport crew. Acted like just another helpful student. But something hung in the air that no one could name. An unease that settled in the bones. When they opened the cold chamber and wheeled her out, the lights flickered twice. One of the movers stopped, said he heard whispering from the ceiling vents. Another tripped, trying to cover her with the tarp. I said nothing. I didn't need to. Because I knew what they were taking wasn't just a cadaver. It was her. Aware. Watching them from within. And she knew exactly where she was going. With me. She's here now, in the guest room basement of the house I inherited from my grandfather, nestled in the hills outside Allentown. Don't worry, it's cooled, sealed, private. No one goes in, no one asks. Sometimes, late at night, when everything is still, I go down to visit her. I sit beside her, talk about how loud and ugly the world still is. But down there, it's like before. Untouched. Silent. I still bring her things. Music. A new cassette. The same glass pin. And every time I return, something's different. The sheet is turned. Her head is tilted. The candle I snuffed out, relit. I don't dream anymore. I don't need to. Because every night now, I know she listens. And someday, when I'm ready, she'll call me back.
I've made deliveries across every corner of Idaho. Coffins, cremation remains. Once, a guy mailed a taxidermied raccoon. Nothing fazed me anymore. The job was boring, but it paid, especially when it involved rural funeral homes that wanted no questions and offered cash bonuses for discretion. That night started just like the others, cold, quiet, and wrapped in that sticky kind of fog that clings to your windows and doesn't let go. I picked up the shipment around 2 a.m. from a shuttered facility outside Coeur d'Alene. The building had no lights on, just a single man waiting by the loading dock wearing a raincoat too big for him. He didn't say a word. He just pointed at a steel container and handed me a clipboard with one signature line already filled in, mine, in handwriting that wasn't mine. That should have been my first red flag. But I took the cash, nodded, and wheeled the thing into the back of the van. My GPS showed the destination, a small funeral home 3 towns over, technically off-grid, no direct roads, no phone service. I drove in silence, headlights carving tunnels through the mist. Something about the weight of that casket was wrong. It shifted like it wasn't packed right, or like something inside was loose. But I didn't stop. Never stop on a private job. It wasn't until the second hour that I started hearing it. Faint, irregular knocking. Not from outside, from the cargo. A slow thud, followed by silence. Then again, 3 knocks. Always 3. I pulled over once just to check the straps, told myself it was road vibration. But when I opened the rear door, the casket had rotated, shifted fully sideways. I hadn't braked hard. Nothing in that van should have moved. The name on the manifest was Delaney Rest Funeral Chapel. When I finally pulled into the gravel lot, it was 4:43 a.m. No lights, no sign of life. Just a single security lamp buzzing over the back entrance. I knocked twice, as the note said. Waited. No answer. And I saw it. Taped to the back door, a small envelope. Inside, another manifest, different address, different funeral home, one I'd never been to, and a note, delivery reassigned, do not open, under any circumstance. Normally that kind of thing would piss me off. Routes are final, drivers don't do reruns. But something about the handwriting on that note, it looked like mine. The loops, the spacing, it rattled me. I double-checked my GPS. The new address didn't exist on any map. But when I typed the name of the funeral home, the app recalculated automatically. No roads, just coordinates, like it already knew. I should have refused, called someone, anyone, but I didn't, because the part of me that took jobs like these, the part that stayed quiet and cashed envelopes, knew better. I loaded back up, turned the van around, and drove. It took nearly 2 hours to reach the new drop site. By then, the sun was bleeding orange through the clouds, and the trees on both sides of the narrow road seemed to lean in just a bit too close. There was no sign, just an unmarked gate and a slanted driveway curling into dense woods. The GPS beeped twice and went dark. I parked in front of a squat concrete building half buried in the hillside. A white door with no handle waited at the base. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. That same 3-knock rhythm echoed from behind me, from inside the van. I didn't move, didn't speak. I reached for the handle, ready to unload, when I noticed something that hadn't been there before. A small tag dangling from the casket's latch. My name. Not the company's, not the client's, just mine. In my handwriting again. I felt it then. A cold draft that shouldn't have existed in a sealed van. The scent of metal and old soil, like something buried too long and disturbed too soon. I opened the doors slowly. The casket hadn't moved, but something was different. A dent in the side I swore wasn't there earlier. And underneath it, frost. Actual frost. I used gloves, loaded it onto the dolly, and wheeled it to the door. It swung open before I could knock again. No one stood there, just a narrow hallway lit by yellow, flickering fluorescence. Against my better judgment, I entered. The walls were lined with photographs, not of funerals, but of deliveries. Trucks, drivers, me. I stopped in front of one. It was me from earlier that night. Same clothes, same posture, but the background wasn't the loading dock. It was this hallway. I left the casket in the center of a cold chamber at the end, and as I turned to leave, I noticed another tag. This one read, "Return pending." My breath fogged. I hadn't realized how cold it had become. I reached the van and slammed the doors, turned the key. Nothing. Dead. No power, no lights, just the faint sound of tires crackling on gravel behind me. But when I looked in the rearview mirror, the lot was empty. I stayed there until sunrise. Then I left on foot, hiking until I reached a main road. I flagged down a trucker who gave me a ride back to town. When I returned to the original pickup location later that week, the building was gone, like it had never existed. I tried to put it behind me, switched jobs throughout my uniforms, but a month later a package arrived at my apartment. No return address. Inside, a clipboard, a manifest, and a photograph of me standing in front of that white door, smiling. Then the dream started. I'm always driving, same van, same fog, and I know the casket is in the back, but when I stop and open the doors, it's not inside. Instead, I find a mirror, and behind me, someone else. I stopped driving at night, disconnected the van battery. Still, every few days I wake up and find it parked in a new spot, dusty, mud on the tires, and the manifest clipped to the dash, blank, except for the delivery status, in transit. Once, I opened the back doors just to check. Nothing inside, but the moment I shut them, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You forgot the signature. I thought about burning it, selling it, leaving it in the woods, but every time I try, I find it again the next morning, parked, clean, waiting. I returned to the highway one day, trying to outrun it. Pulled over when the tank hit empty. That's when I saw it. My van in the rear view. No driver, just rolling towards me. Lights off, engine silent. I blinked. It was gone. But a new delivery tag sat on my windshield. Successful drop. Time stamped for 3:06 a.m. My name signed at the bottom. I don't remember signing anything. There was one more thing. On my hood, resting gently in the wind, was a tag. Yellow, blank, except for one line. Destination, you. I didn't scream, didn't pray, just started the engine and drove. And I haven't stopped since, because somewhere, in some unmarked highway, someone already delivered me. I'm just catching up.
The first time I heard about the viewing room was during my second day of training. "Never go in there alone," the manager said, as we walked through the night shift protocol. "Lights on before you open the door. If the family doesn't show up, close it back up. No exceptions." He said it while looking straight at me, not like a warning, but like he already knew I'd be the one to break the rule. Not every funeral home has one. Most use standard chapels, but the place I worked at in Missouri was different. The viewing room was separate, walls lined with dark wood and antique mirrors in each corner, like the space itself was ashamed of what it held. It was only used for special cases, wealthy families, unusual deaths, or late-night requests. And it was in that room I realized the dead aren't as still as they seem. It felt older than the rest of the building, like it had been built on top of something long forgotten. A red velvet chair always sat beside the casket, and a small white curtain separated the body from the entrance, like that would soften the shock. But the strangest part was the clock on the wall. It always showed the same time, no matter how many times we replaced the batteries. Over time, I realized it wasn't just the room itself that disturbed me. It was the absence of the living. Most of the viewings scheduled there were canceled last minute, and the bodies stayed untouched for days. No visitors, no farewells. I used to think that was tragic, until I started seeing it as an opportunity. The truth is, the viewing room offered something rare in the death industry: privacy. No supervision, no cameras, no crying families or priests mumbling hollow blessings. Just me, the body, and time. Thick and unmoving, like the dust that never settled in there. In that vacuum, I let myself start noticing more than I should. I told myself it was part of the job. Checking if the eyelids were fully closed, if the makeup held under heat, if the fingers were in a natural pose. But sometimes I lingered. I'd touch the hair, fix a collar, smooth the dress like I was preparing someone for a date. Once I whispered good night to a woman in the casket, just to hear if my voice would echo. And it did. Everything changed the night they brought in a young woman named Emily Keats, 19. Motorcycle crash. No family present. Just a note from the police saying the parents were overseas and the viewing was symbolic. She was placed directly in the viewing room, and for some reason, I was left to handle it alone. Emily looked too peaceful. Despite the paleness, her skin tone was even. No visible bruises, no signs of pain. Her face looked like she was resting, like she was waiting for someone, but no one came. Night fell quickly, and I stayed there longer than I should have, just me and her. For the first time, I left the lights off. That was against protocol, I know, but the harsh fluorescent light made it all feel too clinical. In the dark, with just a sliver of light leaking in from the hallway, she looked more human. I sat in the velvet chair beside the casket and waited a few minutes, pretending to be someone important. An ex-boyfriend, maybe. Someone she would have wanted to see. I imagined her life before the crash. Friends, laughter, maybe a favorite band. Somewhere in that haze, I drifted off. I don't know how long I slept, but I woke up with a sharp sense that something had moved. The curtain was swaying gently, though no windows were open. And the clock, for the first time, had changed. It read 2:23 a.m. I'll never forget that. It was like that time had been unlocked. Like for some reason that hour was the only one that still breathed. I stood up slowly, eyes adjusting to the BIM. The first thing I noticed was that Emily's hands seemed looser, less rigid, like they were waiting for something. I left that night ice cold, too rattled to lock the door behind me. My dreams were hazy, but all carried the same tone. Something waiting for me, unmoving, but aware. The next day, I came in early expecting the casket to be closed, but it wasn't. And the flower on her dress, which I'd carefully arranged, was on the floor. I started coming back every night, always after hours, always alone. I never touched anything. I just watched. And each night, something small had changed. The tilt of her head, the curve of her lips, the way her hair seemed disturbed. It was like Emily was slowly adjusting to me. On the 7th night, I broke the last rule, the unspoken one. I spoke to her. A quiet, "I know what it's like to be forgotten," whispered into the dark, hand hovering just inches away. And when I finished the sentence, all the mirrors fogged up, every single one, at the same time, like someone exhaled into them. That night I brought her a gift, a simple necklace, cheap but delicate. I carefully clasped it around her neck and said, "Now you have something that's yours here." And I smiled. I don't know if it was the necklace or the act itself, but the clock started working again. For the first time in years, it ticked forward. That's when the manager noticed. He started questioning my extra hours, my access log, said weird stuff had been happening in the room, security footage cutting out at specific times. "You doing anything in there?" he asked. And for the first time I lied. No. But what truly scared me wasn't the clock or the mirrors. It was the night I found a different offering there, not from me. A white rose, still fresh with dew, lay across her chest. No employee claimed it. No family showed up. That room was being shared. The next night I found small footprints on the waxed floor, barefoot, delicate. They led from the chair to the casket and stopped there. When I stepped closer, I noticed the necklace was gone. In its place, a note, handwritten, in my handwriting. But I swear, I didn't write it. She remembers. Just that. 3 words that knocked the breath out of me. Remember what? The crash? The loneliness? Me? I checked every entry log, every report, and that's when I found it. Emily Keats was never listed in our system. Not once. I showed her name to the manager. He denied it, said no one by that name had ever been brought into the viewing room. "You've been working too hard," he said. But the mirrors still fogged up at night. And even though the clock worked now, it always froze again at 2:23 a.m. I started avoiding the hallway, but every time I walked by, I felt heat radiating off the doorknob, like someone was standing just on the other side, waiting. Some nights I heard footsteps, and more than once, the velvet chair was turned toward the casket, even though no one had touched it. On my last day there, I found an envelope in my locker. No name. Inside was a single photo. Me, sitting in the red chair, smiling at someone out of frame. And in the mirror behind me, the faint outline of a young woman. Light dress, eyes open. I quit that morning. No explanation. I just turned in my badge and left. But I didn't go home. I went to the viewing room one last time. And when I walked in, the clock already read 2:23.
The curtain behind me slid shut on its own, and in the fogged mirror, I saw my reflection with someone else watching me from deep inside the glass. Now I work cremation only. No rooms, no mirrors, no eyes reopening. But sometimes in the microwave's reflection in the break room, I see a pale dress brush past, and when I check the clock on the wall, it's always 2:23. If these stories felt hard to process, it's because they were told by those who were never supposed to speak. They didn't ask for forgiveness. They didn't seek redemption. They just let out what had always been there. The quiet discomfort of someone who never came back from what they did. And now that discomfort is yours. If you made it this far, something in you wanted to hear it all. So help take this darkness even further. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who thinks they understand the human mind, but has never seen through the eyes of the one who caused the fear. And in the comments, tell me which of the 3 confessions will stay with you the longest. Until the next wrong turn.